All right, so former CDC Director Robert Redfield was in a congressional hearing recently and talked about the gonna have to dance around saying some of these words, the origins of the cerveza sickness. Shout out to George Gammon. The origins of the cerveza sickness. Let's see what he had to say.
That I will say, if you World Health Organization, that, quote, we had to take the lab leak hypothesis with extreme seriousness. And you urged Dr. Fauci to investigate both the lab and the natural hypotheses. Shortly thereafter, on February 1st, Farrer convened a meeting of a group of 11 top scientists across 5 time zones and asked Dr. Fauci to join. And he wrote, quote, my preference is to keep this group really tight. Obviously, ask everyone to treat in total confidence, unquote. Dr. Redfield, you were excluded from this call, but up until then, you had been on you were included in every other conversation. What changed? Why do you think that you were excluded from these conversations?
Thank you very much. I think just to emphasize, in early to mid-January, I did have multiple calls with Fauci, Farrar, and Ted about how important I thought it was that science get engaged in aggressive doing both hypotheses. I also expressed as a clinical virologist that I felt it was not scientifically plausible that this virus went from a bat to humans and became one of the most infectious viruses that we have for humans. All viruses are not the same. So when you look at coronaviruses for SARS and MERS, for example, when they entered the human species, which they did via an intermediate, they never learned how to go human to human. Even to this day, they don't know how to go human to human. So you can't equate Ebola with a coronavirus.
Now, why do you think you were excluded from those calls?
Because it was told me that they wanted a single narrative and that I obviously had a different point of view. I'm sure you all have your classified briefings, but the declassified information now, in September of 2019, 3 things happened in that lab. One is they deleted the sequences. It was highly irregular. So researchers don't usually like to do that. Second thing they did was they changed the command and control of the lab from the civilian control to the military control. Highly unusual. And I've been involved in dual use labs when I was in the military. And the third things they did, which I think is really telling, is they let a contractor redo the ventilation system in that laboratory. So I think clearly there was strong evidence that there was a significant event that happened in that laboratory in September. It's now been declassified. You can read it. I'm sure there's more classified information around that. I will say, if you go back and look, in mid-January, I did have multiple calls with Fauci, Farrar, and Tedros about how important I thought it was that science get engaged in aggressive pursuing both hypotheses. I also expressed as a clinical virologist that I felt it was not scientifically plausible that this virus went back to humans and became one of the most infectious viruses that we have for humans. All viruses are not the same. So when you look at coronavirus,
not scientifically.
So the lab leak that they thought it was 3 days earlier.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. Again, I've said this before, that
COVID-19 came from nature instead of the lab leak that they thought it was 3 days earlier.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. Again, I've said this before, that this whole approach that was taken on February 1st and subsequently in the month of February, if you really want to be truthful, it's antithetical to science.
Thank you.
Science has debate, and they squashed any debate.
Thank you. Given what we know now and looking at all the conversations in February of 2020 and before the release of the paper, do you think that Dr. Fauci used this paper to hide the gain-of-function research created this virus?
I can't talk about Fauci's motivation.
Do you think that the paper does hide the truth?
I think it's an inaccurate paper that basically was part of a narrative that they were creating. Remember, this pandemic did not start in January at the seafood market. We now know there was infections all the way back into September. This was a narrative that was decided that they were going to say this came from the wet market, and they were going to do everything they could to support it, to negate any discussion about the possibility that this came from a laboratory.
I got 20 seconds left. Dr. Fauci was affirmatively told in an email that NIAID had a monetary relationship with the Wuhan Institute through EcoHealth Alliance. He was told this in January 27th of 2020. Do you think that Dr. Fauci intentionally lied under oath to Senator Paul when he vehemently denied NIH's funding of gain-of-function
He sure
research?
did.
I think there's no doubt that NIH was funding gain-of-function research.
It's likely that the American tax dollars funded the
he said there's no doubt
gain-of-function
he was
research
lying.
that created this virus.
I think it did not only from NIH, but from the State Department, USAID, and from DOD.
I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
So he admits that we were lied to by Fauci for years. I mean, I hope that you didn't follow him at the time. It was clear to some at the time. Robert Redfield, it was only a matter of time before he came. I mean, you would think he would because he got shut out early. And I know Alex Jones was saying that Robert Redfield may flip like years ago. He was saying that because Robert Redfield had not been included in a lot of stuff at the time, and he said that that power games can go like that, and Redfield obviously is now saying that it was taxpayer money that paid to make this thing, that it was funded by the State Department, USAID, DOD, through UNC, Ralph Barrick, Peter Daszak, and EcoHealth Alliance, and funneled over to Wuhan to do a lot of the testing and stuff, which then they denied, and then released intentionally to the public. That I think they're still going with a leak, but I don't think there was a leak. It may have been a leak for the people at the lab, but was it a leak for everyone who had interest in the lab? I don't know.
Leaked from a lab. There's a hearing today on that. One of the key witnesses was former CDC Director Robert Redfield. He testified that Tony Fauci deliberately covered up the origins of the virus by silencing questions and dissent. Watch. Is the possibility COVID-19 leaked from a lab a conspiracy theory?
Absolutely not.
No.
I would say no, but also it has been approached as such.
No.
Dr. Redfield, I want to stick with you. You have said before that you were locked out of conversations about the lab leak by Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins. Do you think they kept you out of the conversations because you believe COVID-19 may have come from a lab?
Yeah, I think I made it very clear in January to all of them why we had to aggressively pursue this. They came up with a single narrative, which I will argue is antithetical to science. Science never selects a single narrative. We foster, as my colleague here just said, we foster debate. Mm-hmm. And we're confident that with debate, science will eventually get to the truth.
This will probably all get lost, and no one will ever be held accountable for destroying the U.S. economy and killing 1 million people. But the facts don't matter. Jamie Metzl also testified. Metzl was one of the very first people to suggest what pretty much everyone now acknowledges is true, that this virus came from a Chinese government lab in Wuhan. and said so today at the hearings. Jamie Metzl is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, former State Department official, joins us. Mr. Metzl, thank you so much for joining us. Is it frustrating or vindicating for you to be one?
More a comprehensive, but I also
when they infected a man from the tried to explain to Dr. Fauci, who's an immunologist, that this virus, SARS and MERS, when they infected a man from intermediate host, civet cat in the case of SARS and a camel in case of MERS, they never learned how to go human to human. So those original outbreaks were less than 1,000 people, and the epidemics died. And so when everyone thought this was SARS-like, well, it's gonna die too. But this virus was immediately the most infectious virus, not the most, I think probably right behind measles, virus that we've ever seen infect man. So I immediately said, wait a second, this is natural. And then you go back and look at the literature and you find in 2014, this lab actually published a paper that they put the H2 receptor into humanized mice so it can infect human tissue. And then you learn that the new COVID, which came from bats, now can hardly replicate in bats.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? So I said that my view as a virologist, again, my hypothesis, and I never discredited them for their hypothesis, it's the spillover, was that this was most likely to come from the lab. And we need to aggressively investigate both hypotheses.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have an
Began to spread across the world, there were two competing hypotheses about the origin of this virus that needed to be vigorously explored. The first hypothesis is the possibility that COVID-19 infections in humans were the result of a spillover event from nature. This is a situation in which the virus naturally mutates and becomes more transmissible from one species to another, in this case from bats to humans via an intermediate species. This is what happened in previous outbreaks of SARS and MERS and earlier coronaviruses that emerged from bats and spread through an intermediate animal. The second hypothesis is the possibility that the virus evolved in a laboratory involved in gain-of-function research. This is a type of research in which scientists seek to increase the transmissibility or pathogenicity of an organism in order to better understand that organism and inform preparedness efforts and the development of countermeasures such as therapeutics and vaccines. Under this theory, COVID infected the general population after it was accidentally leaked from a lab in China. From the earliest days of the pandemic, my view was both theories about.
So there you have it. It was released. Whether it was accidental or intentional, it is. I mean, I think we can. I think it is intentional, but I guess we'll say that's still up for debate because I don't want to get deleted off here for saying what's. You get deleted back then for saying, that this was created by the government. It was released on purpose for motives that are nefarious and deleterious, I guess. And YouTube deletes you for that. But now it's admitted by this, former CDC director in these congressional hearings, and it's now declassified that, all this stuff is true and everything that was being said was correct and everything that was being reported was incorrect. And, we shut down our economy and, ruined lives and, it started mandates and subverted sovereignty for a bunch of lies, a bunch of liars. So, very disappointing stuff. but it is good that it's, finally being admitted that, it was released. Now, whether that's part of a bigger plan to continue to, you know, control, demolish the economy, the nation state, um, and, pave the way for a depopulated world government, then, um, you can't. I think that that's clearly what the goal of this thing was, but obviously that's speculation and completely unconfirmed. And I'm not saying that. I guess I can't say anything because it would be misinformation. So I don't want to get deleted, but um, obviously there are goals that are not being told to you, and controllers of large events that are um, pretty omniscient and um, also subversive and kind of unknown, or not unknown, somewhat known, but you're not allowed to say. So you can't say anything, or else you get censored, and then you get, um, then they actually spread mistruths about you, and you can't defend your own, you know, overrated history in the ink social world. So it's good that it is good that it's coming out, but obviously I think that there's more coming down the tube. Uh, because I think that that's part of. I can't say it's part of a plan, but you guys understand that I think that there's more things that are going to come this way. I did the Clade X video, which got deleted off YouTube. I got a community guidelines thing for that for just. I mean, I didn't say anything. I just said that it was a scenario that was done by Johns Hopkins and um, some of these other players. I don't know if I can even name them, or you don't get any information about why this stuff gets deleted. They just said it was misinformation or something. But I just did a breakdown video of the Clade X scenario. I just talked about what it was, and then I speculated what it was. If they knew anything in 2018, 2019, when they were, writing these scenarios and running these exercises. But that was deleted in less than a week. I think it was 2 or 3 days that it made, which sucks because it was a long video, and I included a lot of the YouTube clips of their actual pandemic exercise. Oh, I shouldn't have said that word. The actual pandemic exercise, and then I don't even know what words I can use to explain things, which makes things tough on live streams because I could just say things, but then things get deleted quickly, and then you get community guidelines, and then you get kicked off. So you're seeing how censorship can be destructive for free thought, and free expression. You can't get information. I can't say anything. People who have information can't say any information because they'll be called, disinformation, misinformation, purveyors or something. and then they'll be called supremacists or domestic terrorists or something extreme to make it okay to assault that person and kill that person and censor that person and deperson that person and then overwrite the history of that person. And so you see it makes things hard to discuss even when it's admitted on. Here we're watching C-SPAN video of the former CDC director. He was a CDC director during 2020 2021, and we can't. You couldn't say anything then. You're treading in tough waters if you say the P word or the C word or leak or a lab or accidental or on purpose. You have to say things kind of coded and in a way that's hard to understand if you're just an average person trying to figure things out. So you have to be kind of in the know and kind of know what the coded language is, and then figure out what the meaning is through the coded language, and it makes free expression really hard. So censorship is it's wild and it's pretty sick and destructive, and we're seeing it play out even in real time here as I'm trying to explain to you about things that I can't name, even though they're admitted, even though I can't say what, I can't even say, if I say this right here, it's likely that this will get dinged. Or if I say, where's that P at? If I were to say this,
Tried to explain to Dr. Fauci, who's an immunologist.
but anyways, obviously there's a lot of big admissions coming out. Publicly, they're being declassified by the government, but you have kind of these other bank runs, stuff like that are bailed out by, in favor of people. And so your concentration, your ability to follow up on different things is continue. Your focus is continually redirected to the next crisis or disaster. And you see all this stuff about Signature Bank, viral woke videos, and more scandals with this SVB stuff in the Biden administration. So, I don't know, but it's crazy out there, and it's only just begun. So, sit tight, guys. Make sure you get bettering yourself. Bettering your situation in real, in reality ways, in real modalities such as spirit, mind, body. And spirit is, a lot of spirit has to do with wealth as well. So you gotta get, even though living by the dollar bill is obviously a bad idea because you're not in control of the printer. So getting control of the printer is more important than getting dollar bills. But getting dollar bills is also a key factor in reclaiming your sovereignty to some degree and at some level. But dependence on that is a way to actually increase your dependence on the system. So it's a tough game you play with it. You gotta set yourself up with real assets that enable you to be self-sufficient and not a slave in any manner. So you get a farm, you get your cows, you get your food sources, you get your water, you get your energy, water, energy, food, and you take care of that with your money. So then you have real wealth, real ability to maintain that wealth and quality of life. And yeah, so it's inevitably going to get wilder as things progress and as the corruption increases. So first in abreast as far as not just doom pilling yourself, but just knowing the games that are being played and what you got to be aware of and what you need to stop if you ever want to get your life back. But anyways, subscribe so that you know what's coming, guys. Like as well. And yeah, I'll talk to you.